I thought it was epic, transformational. Those are the sorts of adjectives that I use about this call. The president and President Trump and President Putin were in sync with one another. The call was outcome oriented. They were talking about how to save lives, how to stop the carnage, and for me, I was proud to be an American sitting there listening to it.
President Donald Trump and President Vladimir Putin had a phone call yesterday where they're trying to talk about bringing the war to an end. And that was Steve Witkoff, one of the senior, advisors that President Trump has. His formal title is actually Middle East advisor, but he's been so good at diplomacy, he's now taken the lead on this one too. And just listening to what he said there, it's like, wow. I mean, it's hard to imagine just a few months ago the difference between the previous administration, which was talking about nothing but continuing the war, and now then here this time we're talking about ending the war. And the reaction from the left in the U.S. and from a lot of Europe is, well, somewhat different. Not surprising, perhaps. And to try and break this down today and to talk all this stuff through, we have Ian Puddick, the smartest man in London, and Gary Villapiano, of course, the mainstay here on the show. And we're going to try to figure this out. But first of all, Ian, sorry your voice is a little struggling. You've been a little bit sick, so we're really grateful to have you on today.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I've got a teapot full of tea, milk,
and a little bit of rum over the back,
and a fishing rod. What a mix!
Is it some NATO rum, or is it gin? What is that over your shoulder?
No, that's NATO. That's NATO gin.
Gin. Okay, well that it's very medicinal. Maybe you can take that during the show.
We've served, George. Would you say we've served it a great success at the NATO military meetings?
Yes,
yeah, military committee, NATO military committee meetings.
You know,
they really like it. That's all I will say.
I can imagine, and maybe if you served a little more of that, we could get some better decisions out. I don't know. Maybe
they don't drink enough
a little bit.
They don't drink enough.
Right. This is one of those cases where more is actually better. But
true.
Well, listen, first of all, Ian, I just kind of want to get your view of what you thought, because the reason why we have you on the show is because you are the smartest man in London. What you thought of the Trump-Putin conversation, at least what was come out of it, because it's obviously not a decisive moment. There wasn't any big decisions coming out of it, but it did seem to start a process. And then kind of I want to ask you what people there in London are saying about it. But first of all, what's your view?
Well, I forgive my voice, by the way. As I said, I've been in bed for 4 days. I thought it was great. I mean, it's the right thing. Even if you hate Trump, and there's plenty of people that really, really despise and dislike Trump, the fact that he's doing what the diplomats and the ambassadors should have been doing for the last 5 years, talking, but have refused to do that. And it's not been the Russians that have refused diplomacy. It's been the West. It's been us, the West, Great Britain, the EU, and the Americans that have made it very, very, very difficult. So he's doing the right thing, which is talking. I mean, Winston Churchill said, I'm trying to think his exact words. Winston Churchill said, jaw, jaw is better than war. And ultimately, whether you like someone or dislike them, that has to be the right thing to do.
And okay, so that's a good process. And so I guess you're generally in agreement, the same thing that we are, that any kind of a discussion that's going to lead to the end of a war that will stop the killing should be paramount in how this, what we do in the current situation here. But everybody is not on board with that. What do people in London? We'll start with there first. What do you see the public comments after this?
Well, Pete, the public are largely, and we've had this discussion many times on your show, the public are largely propagandized against Russia. So, they all believe that Putin woke up one morning because he's mad, evil, and all of, evil incarnate. He had nothing better to do. He thought, you know what, I'm going to invade and take over Ukraine. And that's, people just think that's exactly what happened. So they hate Putin. Russia's not high on the agenda of anybody over here. So they believe the propaganda. So they just think Putin's a sellout. Oh, sorry, Putin, forgive me. Trump's a sellout. He's pandering. Worshipping at the altar of Putin, because of collusion. I've had that for donkey's years. All of that kind of stuff, and I've got one of my colleagues. I run, obviously I run the distillery bit. We run a plumbing company. I've got one of my colleagues just sat to my left here working away. The two of us were with a customer a couple of weeks ago, and we spoke to the customer. So, what do you think about what's happening? And she, it's disgusting. It's outrageous that they're having peace talks, by the way. So I said, look, it's like a million Ukrainians have died. And she's, I don't care how many have died. I don't care.
Oh my.
Yeah. Okay, I will say no more. Yeah, I mean, it's and this is a middle class, wealthy, affluent person, someone that you would expect to be reasonably informed, but isn't informed because of the propaganda, and that's the problem. That's the problem.
I see. Well, there seems to be a version of that here, whether it's an intentional or planned thing, or just kind of the way the thing has morphed. On CNN last night, there was a lot of the reaction. Now, of course, CNN is something that was always obviously very familiar and comfortable for the Democratic Party, along with MSNBC. So not too much of a surprise, but still, they have some good guests on periodically. This one, however, is a former member of the Office for the Director of National Intelligence, who said her name was Beth Sanner, who seemed to be saying that, ask you, when you look at the conversation and who won that call, definitely wasn't Trump.
I think that there was probably quite a bit that was discussed, but I think that the main thing I take away from this is that there is one person who's driving the terms of this negotiation. It is not Donald Trump. It is President Putin. Because if we were taking us back a week ago where we left Marco Rubio saying we're going to present Russia with an unconditional ceasefire and we'll see which one of these countries is a problem for peace. Well, we just found out, but instead he got praise.
Now, let me ask you, Gary. I mean, you know a lot of the stuff. You check CNN all the time for some of our sources. How much of this is just like, well, if Trump said something, if Trump said the sun came up and it was nice today, we have to attack it? Or do you think that they actually believe this and they would have said something good if there was something good? Or do they actually believe this? What do you think?
No, I don't think that they have every opportunity to give Trump some credit here and there with all that's going on, right? With everything that's going on. But they found nothing good to mention at all. The other thing that strikes me is that, what did you expect? I mean, does anybody really think that Trump, beyond his perpetual sanctions that he keeps threatening, but beyond that, is there one card that he holds? This is unfolding as anyone who's watching the situation that knows, the details of the situation would need to unfold. Putin does hold the cards. Trump, tries to pretend at moments that, there's a card or two that he can slip in there. But my gosh, there aren't any. And now it's coming to the surface because of how forceful Putin is being, because he knows he can be. And that's what's unfolding.
Yeah, that's actually why I wanted to show that particular clip there, because it's symptomatic of what so many people, and I saw some headlines I didn't get a chance to watch, probably is a good thing, that like John Bolton, of course, was, panning the whole conversation, et cetera.
Yeah.
And that implied in all that, both with Sanner here, who was once a high-ranking intelligence official, I think in the Biden administration, obviously Bolton, et cetera. They're acting like there's actually a choice to be made. For example,
Right.
They're suggesting that Trump could just say, okay, I've got these two options. I can either let Putin have what he wants, or I can let Zelensky have what he wants, and I'm going to go with Putin. And so they're being panned for that. But as Gary just said, Ian, there aren't any cards in Putin, in Trump's hand to force Putin to do anything.
Absolutely. Winner takes all. I personally think, and we'll see where this goes. I actually think Putin will be magnanimous in some ways, not completely magnanimous. I'm going to get shot down for saying this. I understand that.
No kidding.
But I think,
be ready, Ian.
I'll start ducking now. But I think Putin will make some concessions, and in a negotiation, any negotiation, doesn't matter what the negotiation is, compromise is not a dirty word. So it's often used, if you compromise, you're weak. But compromise isn't a dirty word. And if you have to make compromises to make things work, I believe Putin will do that. Now, does that make me a Putin lover? In the eyes of many that are listening to me, well, they will say yes, but in reality,
Yeah.
no. No.
And
No.
I think
Danny.
you're sorry. Go ahead, Gary.
Oh, yeah. You know how when there's a disaster, and for the hours right after the disaster, it's a search and rescue mission, and they put all of their efforts and all of their equipment to search and rescue. And a day goes by, and a couple more days go by, and reality starts to set in. And what happens? It stops becoming a search and rescue mission.
Yeah.
It becomes a recovery mission, because they've realized, wow, it's this is what we're facing. And I think that's kind of what's going on now with these talks, that it's no longer a search and rescue. You just recover, and
Right.
whatever you can possibly recover, you will.
And I think along those same lines to the point that Ian just made about possibly Putin trying to be magnanimous. I think the fact that we came out of there with a 30-day agreement on the only actual agreement was the one about the no striking energy infrastructure on either side. This issue about the Black Sea apparently is another one of those that still has to be discussed. But that's one thing that Putin let Trump come out of there with, as opposed to saying nothing at all. You don't get anything, because that's one that Russia actually can benefit from, because they have had a couple of big hits from Ukrainian drones in the last couple of weeks on some of their oil refineries. There's been some pretty significant damage. But the Ukraine side can agree benefit too, because Russia, with impunity, has been attacking energy really across their country for a year and a half now, but probably a better part of 2 years, actually. So that can mutually benefit, but it's not a real big issue for Russia because they're still going in on the ground. But I think that the fact that he said, all right, I don't want you to leave empty-handed, so I'm going to give you something, that should be optimistic for the things that can follow on later. But you see that nobody, at least in this country, is viewing that. And again, I wonder if you've observed anything about how any other people in Europe are characterizing the 30-day non-energy infrastructure hit.
Well, it's absolutely perceived as Trump's weakness and subservience to Putin. It's as simple as that. And Trump doesn't understand how Poland's next. Basically, Poland's next. So many people have said to me, "Yeah, Poland's next." It's insane, and that's just pure propaganda. It's not based on any facts. It's not based on any evidence. It's purely propaganda, and it's the repeated propaganda for years. For years, it's not just a few months of a few ideas floating around on social media. The mainstream media. I mean, I sent you an article, I think just last week. The Independent newspaper here in the UK was saying that Russia's on the brink of collapse.
Oh yeah. I saw that they're on their last legs.
So we.
Not that it was interesting because it didn't say that they were, Russia's having hard times. Like I think the inflation rate's 21%, which is bad for anybody. But they said they're on the verge of collapse, which means it's got to be on the last legs. And I don't see any evidence of that.
No, there's no evidence. There's no evidence whatsoever of that. But the reason the propaganda works is because if we just push Putin and Russia a little bit more and fight them for a little bit longer, because we're not spilling the blood. We're not, as Boris Johnson, the former prime minister, said, this is a proxy war and Ukraine is our proxy. The prime minister said, former prime minister, it's a proxy war. We're happy to fight Putin to the last drop of Ukrainian blood, as George Galloway says. And it's true. It's true. English lads, boys and girls aren't coming home in body bags. German, French boys and girls aren't coming home in body bags. The Ukrainians, 1 million plus, have been killed. And that's not, you'll never see that in a headline anywhere in the newspapers. So the public don't know that. I tell people that and they think I'm insane.
Yeah, because the only thing that is coming out publicly is that there were allegedly 40,000 Ukrainian deaths in the entire war. And that's believed. So when they hear this number of 1 million plus, they just roll their eyes and say, that's just not true. And it's funny because by saying that's not true, 1 million, then they also negate the 40,000 as though those don't even matter. So there's nope, it's untrue. Just keep going.
Yeah, no, I was my best friend Dennis. We had this discussion 2 weeks ago. And he says, so the BBC News haven't got a clue what's going on. Sky News haven't got a clue what's going on. And he named all these huge establishments that are pillars of trust. And he goes, they're all as thick as poo. Oh, he didn't say that. And you know more than them. And it's a great row. It's a great argument.
I want to show this up here on the screen. This is what one of our viewers just said here. He said, agreement is great, but for now, Ukraine keeps getting pounded as well, Kursk, etc. And you see, that's the problem with these attitudes of just saying, oh, it doesn't matter, because it's not British lads, to use your phrase a second ago, but it's Ukraine lads and it's Ukraine girls. Apparently, there's some disturbing images come across that apparently Ukraine is sending more women actually into the front lines, and they're getting the same treatment as the men do. And it's just horrific to actually see. And you'll never see any of those images on the West because they don't want to see them, because that might make people go, maybe we should end the war. One of the things I want to mention there about that previous there with Beth Sanner is toward the end of the comment that she said, yeah, and and Rubio last week said that we'll find out who's really for peace and who's not, because we'll give Russia this 30-day ceasefire ultimatum. Only that's not what actually Rubio said, and it's important to call out these kind of misrepresentations, because that sets the wrong kind of narrative. When people see what was actually said, it's a little different.
We'll take this offer now to the Russians, and we hope that they'll say yes, to peace. The ball is now in their court. And but again, the president's objective here is, number one, above everything else, he wants the war to end. And I think today Ukraine has taken a concrete step in that regard. We hope the Russians will reciprocate.
We hope the Russians will reciprocate, but you see that Trump himself has said Russia has the cards. He said on Air Force One on, I think it was Sunday or Monday of this week, before the phone call, he said, yes, we're going to talk to him. I have a good feeling maybe we'll get a deal, but maybe we won't. So he's aware. And if anybody knows Trump, he doesn't go in saying, well, maybe we'll succeed, maybe we won't. If he has the cards, he'll say, we're going to get this, and that's how it's going to be. So
for sure,
he's clearly saying that. So she's mischaracterizing what he's saying there, and people need to understand that.
Well, that's how propaganda works. It's just not telling lies. It's not about telling lies, but it's distorting the truth or providing a different perception of the truth. It's not just telling outright black and white lies. That's not how propaganda works. It's a distortion of the truth, repeated many times from different perspectives, and it just becomes ingrained. It just becomes ingrained in the communication, and then that becomes the narrative, and then you live your life understanding a fake narrative. It's like me being born in, we won't go there, but me being born in a cult. Some of the crazy things that are in my head.
Hold on, wait a second. Where are you going with this? A cult? Really?
A cult? Yeah, it's a story for another time offline. I'll tell you. So,
that's a whole episode in itself, Ian. All right, I'll book you for that for next week. All right.
No problem at all.
I want to.
But the point is, but it's all about information control. It's all about information control. It's about who controls the information, who controls the narrative, and how you be in a cult. You'd be actually penalized if you deviate from the narrative. Obviously, you're not penalized over here, but what you are is you're labeled a Kremlin stooge, a Putin puppet, a Russian asset, or whatever, just for questioning the narrative.
Apparently someone who's not questioning the narrative and is apparently on the team or in the cult is in this particular telling of things is the chief diplomat for the European Union, Kaja Kallas.
Really, if Russia wants to end this war, they can stop bombing Ukraine, and this war is over if they withdraw their troops. So they haven't really, wanted peace. But I mean, the messages that come out of Russia right now are also really showing that, even if we have had ceasefires before, the Russians are not really or have not really kept their promises regarding the ceasefire agreement. So therefore, I think right now we need to be very firm that any kind of, ceasefire, they can't be coming with conditions because all these conditions just blur the picture. Either you want to end this war or you don't want to end this war. So we need to be very firm.
But very firm on what? You don't have the cards, you don't have the power. The Ukraine side doesn't have the manpower or anything else, and yet you see this arrogance in her voice is really hard for me to take, because she says, "Yeah, who wants peace? He's not even going to have a ceasefire without conditions." Ian, why would Russia, from the position of power, agree to a ceasefire without conditions that only would help the Ukraine side?
Well, they want this war to finish. I mean, everybody wants it. People are dying. Too many people have been killed. It has to stop. It has to stop. And at what point is the war stopped? So it has to stop. I mean, just think of it logically. So imagine the Russians really were weak. They were about to collapse. They'd lost 1 million plus, and they were just losing on every front. She wouldn't have said that, because she would hold all the cards. She just doesn't hold the cards, so she's trying to create a narrative that gives the illusion that they hold the cards and we can keep going. And the peace is, it's just propaganda nonsense. Propaganda nonsense.
Yeah, no kidding, Danny. Yeah, what an unsophisticated argument she brings to the table. So,
It's
like,
pathetic.
I know
It's
you're
pathetic.
holding the right. She's basically saying to Putin, I know you're holding all the aces, but you keep them in your hand. You're not allowed to play them. It's like, are you kidding me? I've spent 3 years fighting for these aces. I'm playing the aces, right?
It's insane. It's insane.
Yeah,
It's
and
insane.
but here's the thing. Here's a question I have. Let's stick with your cult theme for a moment. If I, with my cult members, keep this myth going on here, knowing, as Gary just said, that Russia has 3 aces in his hand, and I keep playing the 2s and 3s in my hand, that at some point the pot is going to get called, and it's going to be exposed that I had nothing in my hand, and then our side loses. So she is continuing to go down a path that will mean more Ukraine's losing, but eventually it will mean also a loss on the European side and the side they're pulling for. Is that not a problem? Do they not think that far through, or maybe take it? But hear me out. There's a potential other reason why they might say this, is that they know that it would work out. They know that he has aces and they've got 2s, but that they're okay with it playing out that way, because when Ukraine loses, they'll blame it on Donald Trump.
Well, they've got that, haven't they? They've got that now. They're really, Trump. So the only reason we have a form of peace is because Trump is subservient to Putin. It's the only reason we have some form of peace. So he's on a hiding to nothing there, even though he's absolutely doing the right thing. And you said, do they think this through all the way to the end? I don't think they do. There's a political term about if politicians got a difficult, hot subject that they're not quite sure how to handle, we'll kick that into the long grass, and it's there for another day. The problem hasn't gone away; it's still there. But let's just get on doing what we're doing, and then we can always tackle that, at some point in the future. But people are dying with these decisions. People have died because of these decisions, and the fact that they're still happy to talk war just shows how stupid they are, and what a disregard they have for lives. Because I'm telling you, and I believe this 1,000,000%, as I've said earlier, if it was British boys coming home in body bags, or French boys, or German boys coming home in body bags, this will be over. This will be over.
Yeah,
but they're not.
Story.
They're not. A completely different story. But that's not happening. So, and I'm repeating myself, but my friend George Galloway, as he said right at the very beginning of all this, we're happy to fight Putin to the last drop of Ukrainian blood. You can.
And in fact, carrying on with that theme, getting down to your backyard now, Keir Starmer, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, is really on this whole big kick to have this big coalition of the willing, and he's trying to take the leadership on this, and he's assembling all these people. And a couple of days ago here, he was talking really brash and bold.
Good afternoon. This morning I convened the largest, strongest group of countries yet behind a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. We agreed we will keep increasing the pressure on Russia, keep the military aid flowing to Ukraine, and keep tightening the restrictions on Russia's economy to weaken Putin's war machine and bring him to the table. Our militaries will meet on Thursday this week here in the United Kingdom to put strong and robust plans in place to swing in behind a peace deal and guarantee Ukraine's future security.
Okay, swing in behind a robust peace deal. What peace deal is he talking about? Because you see that Trump couldn't even get Putin to agree to an unconditional 30-day ceasefire, much less the higher hurdles of getting into kind of a deal. Is Starmer just trying to posture to look tough, knowing that he'll never have to make good on this, or does he have something else in mind?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's really easy to make promises to anyone that you know you don't have to deliver. So if I said something to you that I know I'm never actually going to have to fulfill, I can say that all day long and keep emphatically promising it, knowing that you won't want it and I don't have to deliver it. And that's what he's doing. He's on the world stage, standing up to Putin, standing up against those old Soviets. I know they're not Soviets, but that's how they're perceived largely, unfortunately. And sticking it to Putin. And do you know what? You might be bigger than us, but we won't be threatened by you, and we will stand strong against you at any point. And it sounds great. Sounds great. What as a politician, Churchillian, to stand up there and do this, but it's all posturing. It's all nonsense. It's all nonsense.
Here, 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 here.
But what I will tell you though is they are, and this is funny. So they genuinely are readying 3,000 British troops ready. So when Trump and Putin have their peace deal, if that peace deal crumbles, they've got 3,000 British troops, plus loads of Ukrainian soldiers that have been flown into Britain to be trained back in Ukraine to form a peacekeeping force. The detail of that has not been set in any shape or form because obviously the Russians.
Hang on.
So it's meaningless. It's all meaningless. It's all meaningless.
Okay. Now, set aside for the moment that Russia at every level has emphatically and never deviated from the comment that there would not be one NATO soldier with a NATO patch on his shoulder ever allowed in, or they'll just be considered a combatant and attacked.
Yeah.
Let's say for the moment that some weird way that Russia said, okay, we'll let them be maybe in the far western part of the country. I doubt, I'm very certain they wouldn't do that. But for this hypothetical situation, because this is important for the British side, if they did agree to that and the British 3,000 troops got put in there and then came under fire a year from now, whatever else, at some point, is Britain ready to go to war with Russia over maintaining a peace here?
No, the major arms or munitions depots are depleted. So what are we going to fight with? So this is from a friend of mine, a soldier. So a major general gave them all a briefing over breakfast and said, right, we have to be ready within 3 to 6 months to be deployed in Ukraine to do A, B, C, and D peacekeeping. Sorry, but so we need to get ourselves ready now. Like at school, he said, "Sir, shouldn't we be ready now anyway? That's our job. It's not like right, we've got 6 months to get ready. We're soldiers. This is what we do." I asked him what the major general said, and I'll tell you off air. It's just insane. It's like a Monty Python sketch. It's just nonsense. It's just nonsense. That's what they do all day.
So let me ask you a related question for Britain. Keir Starmer made a lot of news also a little over a week ago, I think it was, where he said that they're going to jump up their defense spending to 2.5% of GDP. And I think it's 2.3 now, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere close to that. So it wasn't a big jump. But as I also understand, Britain has got its own economic problems domestically about spending and having to cut services and a bunch of other things. How are the British people thinking about making further sacrifices so that more money can either go to Ukraine or to the defense spending at their expense? How's that playing out?
I would describe the UK. So not everyone's online. So you guys, for example, including myself, are engaged. We're online. We want to see what's being said, what's happening. We're interested. We're trying to understand things, if that makes sense. But a lot of people just, my mum, my aunts and uncles aren't. They might have a Facebook page, which they might update at Christmas or birthdays or something, but they're not engaged online. And those people are propagandized because they get all of their whatever's happening from the mainstream media. But there is a theme going from the people that aren't engaged online to the ones that are, and it's really simple. we cannot defend our border in Kent from all the illegals that come in every day, sometimes thousands. But we Brits are going to defend the Ukrainian border with billions, but we couldn't do that with our own border. It's just nonsense. It's just nonsense. I mean, it's like a bad joke. And I know you have problems over where you are with the same issues, but on a bigger
yeah,
scale.
and in
on a bigger
our
scale.
country, there is a growing movement of people saying, "Hey, we're tired of sending all this money to Ukraine,
Yeah.
to bottomless pit, so we want to spend it here, etc." Is there a
Yeah.
similar movement in the UK?
Yeah, when I say movement, certain politicians are raising that as a point. Activists, yeah, absolutely. And you can see on social media, and just see like mums and dads are on there saying we can't even defend our own border, sending billions over there. It doesn't make sense, and it just doesn't. It just doesn't.
Yeah, it's hard for me to understand how those messages work. I mean, I guess it has to if you're just not connected and understand some of that stuff. It's not just the UK, because this is a European issue. You just saw that comment I just put on there about Macron and him also talking about how great their military is, but he also can't get into a draft because they don't have the resources for it. So he kind of, gave away the game with that. But here's another expert from France 24 earlier. I think it was today, or maybe it was yesterday. Given the view from he was in this particular quote here. He's going to be talking about what somebody else told him, but he says it because he chooses this quote because that's what this expert believes.
One very close Russia watcher, named Olga Lautman, I think summed it up pretty well. He says that Donald Trump here isn't brokering peace. What he is doing is he is brokering a deal whereby Moscow will be able to return to the global economic stage, and it will be able to return by virtue of selling out Ukraine.
See, it's not just that we're moving in a direction that is trying to reestablish balance between major powers that could potentially benefit everyone, but it's selling out Ukraine. That's how it's being viewed. Meaning, again, he is having this mentality that there's a choice that can be made, and Trump's just making the wrong one, because if he just chose the right one and not sold out Ukraine, then Putin wouldn't get what he wants there. I mean,
Danny, wasn't Ukraine sold out at least in 2014? Wasn't that when they were sold out?
By us,
right.
By us, and you guys.
Yeah,
of course, and they had the Minsk. I don't want to digress too much, but obviously they had Minsk 1, Minsk 2. They had the Minsk agreements, and President Hollande in France and Chancellor Merkel in Germany. Yeah, they both acted as guarantors to ensure that the Minsk agreements were carried through and processed through, and they were the guarantors of that. And both Germany and France have admitted now that they deliberately messed things up so that they would allow NATO to infiltrate Ukraine, and they could arm the Ukrainians to deceive Putin. So it was all a big trick, and they're meant to have great relations. I mean, it's just
and then Boris Johnson seals the deal years later.
In
Istanbul.
Yeah, he destroyed it, didn't he? Just destroyed it. Had a peace deal. Ukraine would be better off now, massively better off now, if they'd had the 2022 deal.
But like you said, Danny, already, you remember how you've said, aren't they going to start pointing their fingers at Trump? Here you go. It's already starting. They're pointing their fingers at him. It's because him selling out Ukraine in this instance. That's how they.
And I like that you're framing there, Gary, because you want to talk about who sold out Ukraine. I mean, it was the Ukrainians themselves. They have agency, and so I don't want to minimize that. But they sure had a lot of help from France, from the United States, from Great Britain, from Boris Johnson specifically, all of which put all the opportunities to get the war off the table that could have given strength and freedom and independence to Ukraine. They threw it all away. So who actually betrayed the Ukrainian people? I think it's not Donald Trump.
No. It's all about, again, what we discussed, at the beginning of your show. It's all about information control. It's all about propaganda. So, when that journalist just said that, he didn't say, oh, by the way, like you said, in 2014, we toppled the government. We've been shelling the Donbass and killing innocent civilians, 10,000 plus. None of that's mentioned. People don't know that. People don't
Yeah.
know that. For me, one of the worst things was the townhouse. Oh, sorry, forgive me, the trade union's house where they burn.
Oh, yeah, in
So
Odessa.
yeah, in Odessa, they burnt all those people alive, and and if you watch the video, these were people in their sort of 30s and 40s, peacefully handing out leaflets, which is a legal right. It's democracy. Support us in our cause, and they rounded them up and burnt them alive. Never seen that on the BBC. Never seen that on Sky News.
Wow.
Never seen that on any mainstream media. It's just information control. There's only one narrative, and as I said, Donald Trump's flipped it completely, and we're still on the old page. That's the problem.
Yeah, it is the problem. And of course, in all of these things, the thing that just drives me crazy is that there is, if not myopia, maybe even blindness. Myopia, at least you can see something close up in front, you can't see far. But blindness, you don't see anything close or far. So what it was, as we're talking about right here, we're detailing how the West has been sabotaging its own interests from 2014 on, the Ukrainian interest from 2022 on. And then when you have Trump coming in and trying to change the narrative, they're trying to ruin that too. But so far, Trump is still focused on it. I don't care what all you people are saying. We're looking beyond the war to something else. Here's what I showed you earlier, that comment from Steve Witkoff this morning, where he was talking about the phone call. Here he's talking about where Trump's focus primarily is.
Does the push for peace in Ukraine run parallel with a push to normalize US-Russia relations? Or, Steve, are they separate issues?
No, I don't think there's any doubt that the two are important. For Russia is a critical relationship for us. It's critical as it affects all other things out there: China, Iran, the Middle East. These two leaders coming together and having conversations about nuclear proliferation, which they did yesterday and was enormously positive. This is enormously beneficial for the world at large, and the president believes in this. He believes in peace. He believes in engaging. He believes in using peace through strength to create a better world for everybody. And with that could come a drop in defense budgets. Take all that money and spend it on things that matter more than waging war all the time. This is his policy.
Now, what a crazy idea that is, that to potentially have peace, to lower defense budget and actually spend that money on something better. I mean, you can argue whether this will actually come to pass, whether they'll actually get down that done. That's a fair argument to have. But at least he's talking that we want to get war off the table and think long term, that everybody benefits, to include Europe. Do you think, Ian, that at some point, if this happens, maybe they'll try and blame Trump for this, but they would probably be really happy to get cheap Russian gas back again in Europe, don't you think?
Well, they made a very, very conscious decision to buy, very well, as Biden called it, freedom fuel, American freedom fuel, which was, I think, 4 or 5 times the cost. But the big issue isn't the 4 to 5 times actual cost of the LNG gas. They had to spend literally hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion, building the infrastructure so that when the LNG is imported, they can turn it back from LNG into natural gas. They didn't have that infrastructure, so they had to build that, and build that very quickly. So they are really deep. It's a really deep-rooted belief to say that I will sacrifice our economy. I mean, the German economy is the #1 powerhouse of Europe, and it's just declining. And they're accepting that. It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, and I guess at some point it's going to either have to make some sense,
Yeah.
or they're just going to get left behind. The Russians, the European side is going to get left behind, because I look. Trump was talking about, he was on Laura Ingraham last night. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to cut any of those comments, but his focus is still on trying to get this done, but he recognizes that there are some limitations to it, and he wants to improve things going forward. But he is not going to relent on this. He's not going to go back and say, all right, tell you what, Keir Starmer and Macron and some of these other people, to people in the United States, you put enough pressure on me, fine, I'll go ahead and just keep supporting Ukraine, because he knows that that's not going to succeed. So one way or the other, we're moving pretty close to a point to where there's going to be a put up or shut up moment for Europe, because Trump is probably going to get to the point to where he'll have to either say, I'm going to give in and go back, or he's going to say, I'm standing in. I'm going to agree to this with Putin, whatever those terms turn out to be. And if you don't agree to them, Kiev and to Brussels and everybody else in Europe, y'all can do it on your own, but we're not going to. And now that's going to make a lot of people's heads blow up.
Yeah.
But I think that if push comes to shove, I think you'll get there.
Yeah, I think he's already said that in without directly saying that. In other words, just do your own thing. As he said to Keir Starmer, can you take on Russia?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember in the White House, he said that, and Keir
Right.
Starmer's face
Right.
went white. He didn't laugh. He did not
No.
laugh. I
No.
noticed on that. What
Yeah.
would happen? What would happen if Trump does say what I just said there, or any version of
Well,
it? What is
it-
Starmer
it-
going to say then?
I don't have a magic wand and I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm really confident my answer is accurate. The UK, Germany, France, with I say this without trying to sound as derogatory as it's going to sound, we are US vassals. So at the moment we're on the wrong page, but very, very quickly the page will turn and we'll be doing whatever Trump says. Very, very soon. It's going to happen. There'll be a bit of a fight beforehand with Trump, but it's going to happen. Because what's the alternative? What's the alternative? There isn't an alternative.
Yeah.
I mean, the right alternative would be that they would be independent, sovereign countries making decisions for themselves, by themselves, without the influence of America, but having friendly relations, really good working relations, trading relations with. That would be the right. That would be the nirvana. Will that happen? I don't think so. But they'll turn the page at some point because they don't have any other choice.
Yeah, I think that's the really core issue there. If push does come to shove, the rhetoric is going to drop really fast, because the minute that Starmer looks behind him and looks at the coffers that you're pointing about, or the arms depots or the production capacities, and goes, what's that spreadsheet say about how it would work out if we went to war with Russia? Wouldn't work out very good. And then he's not going to commit suicide. I mean, he may be bold and brash, but he's not stupid or suicidal. So I think that really it would have to come down that way.
Yeah, no, of course. The British economy is not doing great. On Twitter, I still call it Twitter. I don't call it X. I'm afraid. I haven't grown up yet. But there's a Twitter handle, British debt, or UK debt, or Great Britain debt, and it's insane. And it's like the American debt. It's just moving all the time. It's just going up as we just keep borrowing money. So we've got no money for things in this country, same in the States, no money, but we've got plenty of money, billions in fact, to protect somebody else's border because we don't like the people on the other, we don't like the person on the other side. It's insanity. It's just nuts.
Well, I think one way or another, this insanity is going to come to an end pretty soon, and it can't come quick enough for those Ukrainian men who are still alive today as we're making this video here. It grieves me. Can you just imagine, and I'll say this in closing, I mean, the fact that Zelensky just keeps throwing guys into this meat grinder that can't have any other outcome other than you're going to lose. You're going to lose with this territory, you're going to lose with this territory. Those are the only options. There's no other option besides which version of loss. And yet men are still asked to die every day for where
For
the
nothing.
end
For nothing.
lies. Yeah, for nothing.
They are heartbreaking. They are truly, truly heartbreaking. The videos of them just pulling kids off the street and pulling them into vans, and those kids, they know when they go in that van, they're dead. They're a dead man walking. It's disgusting.
It is.
And
It's very well said.
we enable that. We absolutely enable that because we're not supplying the blood. We just supplied the money and the guns. It's absolutely outrageous. It's so sick.
Yeah.
In, modern Europe, they're pulling people, kidnapping people. Guy goes out for a walk with his dog and never comes home. All this kind of stuff. It's absolutely sick. Absolutely sick. And it's normalized because you won't see that on the news. You won't see that on the news. The British public aren't aware of that unless they go on social media and see it. It's disgusting.
And like you said, they don't do that very often, or on this side either.
No.
Well, listen, we really appreciate you coming on today, Ian, and again, hope you get well soon. Sorry to have, put you on the air and made you scratch your voice up there, but have a little of that NATO gin, and then and go fly fishing there. That'll probably help.
So just only for American nostalgic value. So this is a 1970s St. Croc's fishing machine, and when I was 8, my dad bought me one of these to go fishing with, and it's a little telescopic rod, and I managed to find 2 on eBay, still boxed up. So I'm going to teach my little boy. But it was a really, really simple. I remember going fishing for the first time, and I caught a reasonable sized fish, and then I didn't know how to get the hook off. 'Cause I didn't know what I was doing.
What's reasonable,
Yes.
Ian? What's reasonable?
That's so big.
All right, you
I mean, I was 8 years old. Yeah, I was 8. No. I was 8. I was 8 years old. But the guys at the Alexandra Palace fishing lake all thought it was some American gimmick, which perhaps it is in some ways, but it's really good.
It is. All right. Well, listen, man, I'm gonna expect some photographic proof of this. I want to see some of these fish that you guys are when you and your son are out on a future episode. I'd love to see that.
With pleasure. Pleasure.
That'll be great. Great. And it's a pleasure to have you on today, too. And actually, we got another show coming up here in just a few minutes. We got to hurry up and jump off, actually, because Gary is actually going to be on with Larry Johnson, Larry the Shirt Johnson, who's got a different shirt on, kind of like Ian today. We'll see how those compare. But Gary, what do you got coming up?
Well, we're going to talk about the phone call and what the next steps are and some of the discrepancies between the readouts, between what the Kremlin says occurred and what the White House said occurred. And then also President Trump talked to Zelensky this morning. We're waiting to see if there's some news out of that. We don't have any details about it, so we'll find out about that. And then, Danny, you're coming up at 3:30.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that. Didn't get a lot of news, but Ukraine has launched a new attack into Russia in the Belgorod area, not just in the Kursk area after getting driven out. They've tried again, and I'm going to show you how this is not only not helping, this is a long pattern of things that hurt the Ukraine in ways you may not understand. I'm going to show you how that happened militarily and diplomatically at 3:30 this afternoon. But in any event, let's jump off now so we can get Larry back on, and we'll see you guys on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.